This is the construct. It's our loading program. We can load anything from clothing to equipment, weapons, training simulations, anything we need.
Right now, we're inside a computer program?
Is it really so hard to believe? Your clothes are different, the plugs in your arms and head are gone. Your hair has changed. Your appearance now is what we call residual self-image. It is the mental projection of your digital self.
This isn't real.
What is real? How do you define real? If you're talking about what you can feel, what you can smell, what you can taste and see, then real is simply electrical signals interpreted by your brain. This is the world that you know. The world as it was at the end of the 20th century. It exists now only as part of a neural interactive simulation that we call the Matrix. You've been living in a dream world, Neo. This is the world as it exists today.
Our next guest says there's a powerful reason why we love talking to our pets. Justin Gregg is his name. He's a scientist and college professor who lectures on animal behavior, including the human animal.
Yeah.
His new book is called Humanish: What Talking to Your Cat or Naming Your Car Reveals About the Uniquely Human Need to Humanize. Hello, Toaster.
Yeah.
Gregg explores anthropomorphism, the tendency to humanize the non-human. And in the video you're about to see, he explains the appeal of something you might have seen outside stores, car washes, the like, the inflatable waving tube guy. Take a look.
First of all, they have eyes. Eyes are something that humans are attracted to. Most animals are, but we immediately are drawn to the eyes. And it has a mouth, so it has a face that's kind of human-like. And it's moving around in a way that it sort of defies the natural world. There's no wind.
In our everyday lives, we engage in anthropomorphism all the time. So it just seemed the natural thing for me to want to talk to the world about.
Why does it have such a grip on us? Why are we unable to shut it off?
Yeah, if you think about why it exists, our brains are always on the lookout for other humans to connect to, right? That's what makes us such a successful species. And so if we see anything that looks like a human, we want to treat it like a human, because that's a chance to connect. And so when we see that our cats or our dogs look or behave like little humans, it happens automatically.
I always see a little face in the wall socket, the little two plugs where you put the thing. It's like,
Do you?
I see faces everywhere. Yeah, it's a weird
Really?
phenomenon. You don't have that happen?
No.
It looks like a little smiling.
I get
In a
that all
wall
the time.
I get it all the
I get it
time.
all the time.
You do it all the time?
Oh, you see faces everywhere. Yeah.
Wow. You also say there's a direct line to cuteness in our brain. If we see a cute animal, we react very differently. A cute baby, we react very differently, as opposed to a baby that might not be so cute, or an alligator, for instance. There's a direct line to that.
That's true. Like, our brains evolved to see a baby and want to care for
Yes.
it. You know, that makes sense. So when we see a cat or a dog that looks baby-like, you know, it's got big eyes, it's adorable, our brains do exactly the same thing. It happens quickly and subconsciously. We want to care for it.
Justin, we do it with inanimate objects, which I also thought was interesting in your book.
That's true. I mean, just yesterday.
For instance, yeah, go
Yeah,
ahead.
to celebrate the launch of the book, my editor made these cookies with little eyeballs on them.
Uh-huh.
And suddenly, half the people in the room wouldn't eat them because they looked too human.
Oh, yeah. I
so-
identify. I
Yeah.
can't throw out a stuffed animal. I put it in the trash, and then it looks at me, and then I'm like, oh, come on back over
Tony,
here.
you big softy.
We're in the same boat. I've never thrown out a single stuffed animal. I've got them all in the.
And he sees faces and plugs.
Yeah, that's right.
No problem
Everywhere.
there.
He
Justin
sees faces
Gregg, I see a
everywhere.
great bestseller in this. The book is called Humanish. It's on sale now.
Water, the source of life, the essence of existence. Its significance stretches beyond quenching thirst. It's woven into the very fabric of our world, even into the principles that shape our architecture and understanding of the universe. Among the ancient philosophers who contemplated the essence of life and the elements that compose it, one figure stands out, Thales of Miletus. Born in the ancient Greek city of Miletus around 624 BC, Thales is often regarded as one of the first Western philosophers and the father of scientific inquiry. His profound insights into the natural world laid the groundwork for many scientific disciplines, including physics and geometry. Central to Thales' philosophy was the belief that everything in the world originated from a single fundamental substance, water. To Thales, water wasn't merely a physical element, it symbolized the primary source of all existence. He observed its transformative nature, its ability to flow, freeze, and evaporate, and concluded that it must be the basis of all matter. Thales believed that everything in the universe was in a constant state of flux, with one form giving way to another in an endless cycle of creation and destruction. And at the heart of it all was water. Thales' theory that everything was made of water was revolutionary for its time. It challenged the prevailing notion that the world was controlled by capricious gods and instead proposed a rational, naturalistic explanation for the nature of reality. Thales' fascination with water extended beyond philosophical musings. It influenced his understanding of architecture as well. One of the most enduring architectural features inspired by Thales' philosophy is the arch. Thales' legacy lives on in the scientific method, which relies on observation, experimentation, and logical reasoning to uncover the truths of the natural world. His bold assertion that everything was made of water was just the beginning of a journey that would ultimately transform our understanding of the cosmos.
The ancient Greeks found 3 relationships between notes especially pleasing. Now we call them an octave, a fifth, and a fourth.
An octave is easy to remember because it's the first 2 notes of Somewhere Over the Rainbow. Somewhere. A fifth sounds like this, la, la, or the first 2 notes of Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. And a fourth sounds like la, la. You can think of it as the first 2 notes of Here Comes the Bride.
In the 6th century BCE, the Greek philosopher Pythagoras is said to have discovered that those beautiful musical relationships were also beautiful mathematical relationships by measuring the lengths of the vibrating strings. In an octave, the string lengths create a ratio of 2 to 1. In a fifth, the ratio is 3 to 2, and in a fourth, it is 4 to 3.
Seeing a common pattern throughout sound, that could be a big eye-opener of saying, well, if this exists in sound, and if it's true universally through all sounds, this ratio could exist universally everywhere, right? And doesn't it?
Pythagoreans worshiped the idea of numbers. The fact that simple ratios produced harmonious sounds was proof of a hidden order in the natural world, and that order was made of numbers. A profound insight that mathematicians and scientists continue to explore to this day.
He hit his head. but I'm okay.
They put you in restraints.
Yeah, it's just a precaution. They're a little paranoid. Oh, it's you. I'm sorry.
What happened? What's he doing here?
He slipped and fell outside his office building.
His office building.
He's on conditional release.
You're out.
I'm better. I'm sorry. That wasn't me who did that to you. To your friend. You know that, right? You're a doctor. You know it's a disease. I'm being treated. I'm okay now.
Great. Glad you're okay.
In the middle of the 16th century, a talented young anatomist named Andreas Vesalius made a shocking discovery. The most famous human anatomy texts in the world were wrong. They not only failed to account for many details of the human body, they also described the organs of apes and other mammals. While Vesalius knew he was right, announcing these errors would mean challenging Galen of Pergamon, the most renowned physician in medical history. But who was this towering figure, and why did doctors working more than 1,300 years later so revere and fear him? Born in 129 CE, Galen left home as a teen to scour the Mediterranean for medical wisdom. He returned home a gifted surgeon with a passion for anatomy and a penchant for showmanship. He gleefully entered public anatomy contests, eager to show up his fellow physicians. In one demonstration, he caused a pig to lose its voice by tying off one of its nerves. In another, he disemboweled a monkey and challenged his colleagues to repair it. When they couldn't, he did. These grisly feats won him a position as surgeon to the city's gladiators. Eventually, he would leave the arena to become the personal physician to 4 Roman emperors. While his peers debated symptoms and their origins, Galen obsessively studied anatomy. He was convinced that each organ had a specific function. Since the Roman government largely prohibited working with human cadavers, Galen conducted countless dissections of animals instead. Even with this constraint, his exhaustive investigations yielded some remarkably accurate conclusions. One of Galen's most important contributions was the insight that the brain, not the heart, controlled the body. He confirmed this theory by opening the cranium of a living cow. By applying pressure to different parts of the brain, he could link various regions to specific functions. Other experiments allowed him to distinguish sensory from motor nerves, establish that urine was made in the kidneys, and deduce that respiration was controlled by muscles and nerves. But these wild experiments also produced extraordinary misconceptions. Galen never realized that blood cycles continuously throughout the body. Instead, he believed the liver constantly produces an endless supply of blood, which gets entirely depleted on its one-way trip to the organs. Galen is also credited with solidifying the popular theory of the 4 humors. Introduced by Hippocrates centuries earlier, this misguided hypothesis attributed most medical problems to an imbalance in 4 bodily fluids called humors.
I cannot emphasize enough the importance of the 4 humors and how you must observe and record symptoms so that you may properly treat a disease. I believe that man's body is made up of 4 key humors. These are blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. Blood, of course, is hot and moist. Phlegm is cold and wet. Yellow bile is hot and dry, and black bile is cold and dry. When all 4 humors are properly balanced, a man is in perfect health. But when there is too much or too little of one of the humors, or it is entirely missing from the body, illness or disease occurs. Through observation, we're able to see which of the humors are out of balance. This can then be treated with opposites. For instance, If a man has too much phlegm, which is cold and wet, he should be treated with something hot and fiery, such as pepper. You can learn all about them by reading one of my books, you know. So far, I've written more than 60 of them.
To correct the balance of these fluids, doctors employed dangerous treatments like bloodletting and purging. Informed by his poor understanding of the circulatory system, Galen was a strong proponent of these treatments, despite their sometimes lethal consequences. Unfortunately, Galen's ego drove him to believe that all his discoveries were of the utmost importance. He penned treatises on everything from anatomy to nutrition to bedside manner, meticulously cataloging his writings to ensure their preservation. Over the next 13 centuries, Galen's prolific collection dominated all other schools of medical thought. His texts became the standard works taught to new generations of doctors, who, in turn, wrote new essays extolling Galen's ideas. Even doctors who actually dissected human cadavers would bafflingly repeat Galen's mistakes, despite seeing clear evidence to the contrary. Meanwhile, the few practitioners bold enough to offer conflicting opinions were either ignored or ridiculed. For 1,300 years, Galen's legacy remained untouchable until Renaissance anatomist Vesalius spoke out against him. As a prominent scientist and lecturer, his authority influenced many young doctors of his time. But even then, it took another 100 years for an accurate description of blood flow to emerge, and 200 more for the theory of the four humors to fade. Hopefully, today we can reap the benefits of Galen's experiments without attributing equal credence to his less accurate ideas. But perhaps just as valuable is the reminder that science is an ever-evolving process, which should always place evidence above ego.
Today we are looking for the philosophical depth in the famous quote of the ancient Greek philosopher Protagoras. Man is the measure of all things. So what does this mean? Protagoras believed that all knowledge and values are shaped by human perception and experience. That is, each of us defines our own reality through our personal opinions and sensations. This means that concepts such as right or wrong, beautiful or ugly are subjective and can vary from person to person. Essentially, Protagoras argued that there is no absolute reality. Everything is relative. This idea laid the foundation for a philosophical perspective known as relativism. Remember this when you debate what is right and wrong. It's all about perspective.
Hele game met de Mille Margaris naar geweest. Delos Sastes
Socrates. Hey, we know that name. Yeah. Hey, look him up. Oh, it's under Socrates. Oh, yeah. Socrates. The only true wisdom consists in knowing that you know nothing. That's us, dude. Oh, yeah. Let's bag him. Yeah.
Hosidor, tes clepsydras, hypiou, hemon, hemerai.
How's it going? I'm Bill. This is Ted. We're from the future.
Socrates.
Now what? I don't know. Philosophize with him. All we are is dust in the wind, dude. Dust. Wind. Dude.
Himes, Uten alo, Blanconiotos.
Let's get out of here, dude.
Socrates, the trial is over. Here's your hemlock. Ah, thank you. Well, what was the verdict? When do I get out of here?
Socrates, the verdict was death.
Death? You gotta be kidding me. For what?
For teaching the youth wisdom.
Well, I'll take it all back. Call him in here. I'll renounce everything. Let's get out of here. Let's go get some Chinese food.
But Socrates, you drank the hemlock.
So what?
It's poisonous.
It is? Since when?
Didn't you know hemlock is poisonous?
I do now. Look, I only know general things. What is truth? What is justice? I never learned details. I don't know what is poisonous and what is not poisonous. This is the kind of thing that irritates me about you guys. Oh. All right. So, I'm going to die. So what? When does this stuff take effect? 2, 3 years?
2, 3 minutes.
What a lousy day this was. All right. I'm going to lay here, and I'm going to die. And you know what's going to happen? You guys are going to go out, and you'll have dinner, and you'll sit and stare at each other. I was the only one who ever talked in this whole group. It was always Socrates, what is truth? Socrates, what is the nature of the good? Socrates, what should I order? Socrates, what are you having? And not once did anyone ever say, Socrates, hemlock is poison. Hey, Plato, how do you do that? What? Make your body like rubber. You know, I could eat 1,000 chocolate chip cookies right now. I'm okay. I feel better. Must have been just a passing. Plato, come to me.
Yes, master.
What did he say?
He said, "Come, Mr. Tallyman, tally me banana. Daylight come, and me wanna go home."
Asking oneself and others what the perfect version of something is, the ideal version, might sound like a strange idea. What is the perfect marriage, or career, or system of government, or school? It can feel immature and naive to bother much with such questions. They're just daydreams. After all, who cares about ideal versions? We might as well deal with what we've got. But the great ancient Greek philosopher Plato strenuously disagrees with this. Throughout his work, he argues that focusing on the ideal version of something is one of the most useful kinds of thought exercises we can generate. It's by knowing what we think something should be like that we can more clearly start to define what might be wrong and focus on what we need to do to make the world slightly better. When he was talking about ideals, Plato used a slightly strange but ultimately rather useful word, the forms. So he asked not what is the ideal friendship or the ideal kind of parental love, he asked what is the form of friendship or the form of parental love. It does sound strange, but what he had in mind was something very practical. When a Greek stonemason was carving an ornament, they wouldn't just make it up themselves. They'd make use of a wooden template, or form, to check if they were getting it right. The form itself was made by the master, but if the mason possessed the form, they could more reliably do perfect work. This is Plato's basic picture of what an ideal is. It's the guide you need that shows you how to do something well yourself. If you've got possession of the form, you can be guided towards a true goal. A form, as Plato sees it, is a blueprint, a set of instructions for making a very good version of something. That's why we all need a well-thought-through set of forms to guide us in life. And unsurprisingly, it is philosophy that can guide us to these forms. So, for example, the form of friendship is a mental model of what a really good friendship actually involves. And if you grasp this model, if this idea is active in your mind, you will know how to be a good friend. Similarly, having a form of education in mind is going to be very useful for the teacher. It'll stop her being buffeted by events and day-to-day pressures. She'll be able to keep in mind where, ideally, she should be going. We've typically thought of ideals as fantasy projections that blithely ignore most of what life is actually like. We think of them as the opposite of being realistic. But Plato sees an ideal as the result of a deep understanding and careful engagement with reality. Someone setting up an airport would need, in the Platonic scheme, to have in mind the ideal air traffic control system, something optimally effective, efficient, and safe. This is the person who would, in Plato's terms, have grasped the form of air traffic control. We all need to have as many forms in mind as we possibly can. Plato is breaking the habitual assumption that searching for the ideal is at odds with getting things done in the rough and tumble of the real world. And he's pushing us to be more exacting about where we are trying to head to. If an ideal seems utterly distant and hopeless, maybe the problem isn't that it's too idealistic, but, in a strange but important way, actually not idealistic enough. That is, we've not quite yet discovered the form. We shouldn't abandon our ideals. We should get more ambitious about them, and Plato's philosophy is on hand to help us.
What is reality? Knowledge? The meaning of life? Big topics you might tackle figuratively, explaining existence as a journey down a road or across an ocean, a climb, a war, a book, a thread, a game, a window of opportunity, or an all too short-lived flicker of flame. 2,400 years ago, one of history's most famous thinkers said life is like being chained up in a cave, forced to watch shadows flitting across a stone wall. Pretty cheery, right? That's actually what Plato suggested in his Allegory of the Cave, found in Book 7 of the Republic, in which the Greek philosopher envisioned the ideal society by examining concepts like justice, truth, and beauty. In the allegory, a group of prisoners have been confined in a cavern since birth with no knowledge of the outside world. They are chained facing a wall, unable to turn their heads, while a fire behind them gives off a faint light. Occasionally, people pass by the fire carrying figures of animals and other objects that cast shadows on the wall. The prisoners name and classify these illusions, believing they're perceiving actual entities. Suddenly, one prisoner is freed and brought outside for the first time. The The sunlight hurts his eyes, and he finds the new environment disorienting. When told that the things around him are real, while the shadows were mere reflections, he cannot believe it. The shadows appeared much clearer to him. But gradually, his eyes adjust until he can look at reflections in the water, at objects directly, and finally at the sun, whose light is the ultimate source of everything he has seen. The prisoner returns to the cave to share his discovery, but he is no longer used to the darkness and has a hard time seeing the shadows on the wall. The other prisoners think the journey has made him stupid and blind and violently resist any attempts to free them. Plato introduces this passage as an analogy of what it's like to be a philosopher trying to educate the public. Most people are not just comfortable in their ignorance, but hostile to anyone who points it out. In fact, the real-life Socrates was sentenced to death by the Athenian government for disrupting the social order, and his student Plato spends much of the Republic disparaging Athenian democracy, while promoting rule by philosopher kings. With the cave parable, Plato may be arguing that the masses are too stubborn and ignorant to govern themselves. But the allegory has captured imaginations for 2,400 years because it can be read in far more ways. Importantly, the allegory is connected to the theory of forms developed in Plato's other dialogues, which holds that, like the shadows on the wall, things in the physical world are flawed reflections of ideal forms, such as roundness or beauty. In this way, the cave leads to many fundamental questions, including the origin of knowledge, the problem of representation, and the nature of reality itself. For theologians, the ideal forms exist in the mind of a creator. For philosophers of language viewing the forms as linguistic concepts, the theory illustrates the problem of grouping concrete things under abstract terms. And others still wonder whether we can really know that the things outside the cave are any more real than the shadows. As we go about our lives, can we be confident in what we think we know? Perhaps one day a glimmer of light may punch a hole in your most basic assumptions. Will you break free to struggle towards the light, even if it costs you your friends and family? Or stick with comfortable and familiar illusions? Truth or habit? Light or shadow? Hard choices. But if it's any consolation, you're not alone. There are lots of us down here.
Pop quiz. Are you a Platonist or an Aristotelian? An idealist or an empiricist? Do you think up neat rules to describe the universe and then try to fit data into your theory? Or do you observe the world and draw conclusions from what you see? Do you trust math or your senses? Before you decide, let's take a trip to urban Athens, circa 399 BCE. Socrates didn't have a single clearly formulated natural philosophy. He didn't even study nature. He studied politics and morality and prided himself on not claiming to know things. But Socrates did two important things. He asked a lot of questions, which influenced how philosophers went about teaching their ideas, and he inspired the two rock stars of classical Greek philosophy. Socrates held that knowledge comes from asking questions. So many questions. His name is attached to the Socratic method, in which you constantly ask questions so that students can steadily break down a big problem into smaller parts they can test hypotheses against. It's okay if they realize that a hypothesis is wrong. In fact, it's good. It means they're moving away from falsehood. The Socratic method is an example of negative hypothesis elimination, or proving that something is wrong to narrow down the possibilities of what might be right. But Socrates' biggest legacy may be his student, Plato, and his student Aristotle. Both were inspired by Socrates' methods, but they arrived at some very different conclusions about the world. We know a lot about Socrates Socrates thanks to his students. Chiefly, Plato founded a physical school called the Academy to train Athenians in how to think like Socrates. Plato wrote down dialogues between Socrates and other thinkers, including Parmenides. He was the Eleatic philosopher who believed that nothing really changes and thus we can't trust our senses. This had a big impact on Plato, whose best-known works include Republic, in which Socrates defines justice and argues for rule by a philosopher-king instead of democracy, and Timaeus, in which Socrates talks about the nature of the universe. Plato had a big impact on thinking about thinking. Today, we still use Plato's name for a place of philosophical learning, academy, to describe the concept of higher education in general. At the original academy, Plato emphasized training in how to think properly. Over the door of the academy was inscribed the dictum, "Let no one enter here who is ignorant of geometry." Plato based his own philosophy on geometric laws. He taught a Pythagoras-inspired idealism, or a theory of nature based on perfect abstractions, rules of which real-world stuff could only ever be imperfect examples. So Plato had to fit his observations to his theory. That idealism is one of the reasons people think of Plato as more of a philosopher than a scientist. Plato built on the work of the pre-Socratic schools, but he developed a more complete way of looking at the natural world than they did. And his students took off in search of solutions, even as they changed his underlying theory. The only Greek who wrote more philosophy than Plato was Plato's own star student and rival, Aristotle. Compared to Plato's idealistic abstractions, Aristotle's philosophy makes more common sense. His ideas are based on empirical evidence. He observed the world and then came up with a theory that explained it. This order of operations is at the heart of modern scientific practices. Aristotle was from Macedonia in the north of Greece, but he studied at Plato's Academy in Athens for 20 years until Plato died. Afterward, Aristotle took a lucrative gig. King Philip II of Macedonia hired him as tutor to his son, Alexander. And you know this particular Alexander, he decided to conquer the entire Earth. Before age 30, he ruthlessly conquered much of Asia, Africa, and Europe, ruling over more area than anybody until Genghis Khan. Aristotle's influence on Alexander the Great reminds us that science is always social. From the very beginning, scientists have served bad, heartless dudes. Aristotle, a man who literally wrote the book Ethics, pushed his most famous pupil to invade Persia, kill barbarians, and become a brutal warlord. After Alexander died young, Aristotle went back to Athens to start his own school, the Lyceum. The Lyceum was pretty different from Plato's Academy. Because Aristotle liked plants and liked to walk and talk, his school wasn't in a building, but a grove of trees outside the city. And his school was called the Peripatetic, meaning walky, and thus informal, not like the Academy. It was during the Lyceum years that Aristotle probably wrote many of his most famous works, including Metaphysics, On the Heavens, On the Soul, which is actually an amazing book of proto-biology meets psychology, and his school's highly influential set of textbooks on natural philosophy called Physics. How did Aristotle answer our big questions about physics, such as what was stuff and where are we? He posited a complete system joining the elements and the heavens. This became the basis for European thought about the physical world for 2,000 years. Let's compare Aristotle's system to his mentor Plato's in this episode's Thought Bubble. For Plato, the cosmos was perfect. It had perfect rules that could be studied, and all cosmic stuff was made up of atoms that were perfectly geometric, platonic solids, each creating one element. Tetrahedrons of fire, cubes of earth, octahedrons of air, icosahedrons of water, and dodecahedrons as the shape of the whole universe, like a giant celestial set of D&D dice. Plato's theory of the heavens stated that the wandering stars, that is the planets, followed a path of uniform circular motion. You see, the wandering stars must move in perfect circles since the cosmos is orderly. But this one is moving backwards. Plato's students could see that Mars, for one, seemed to jump backwards, showing retrograde motion. Plato didn't really have an explanation. European astronomers would spend the next 2,000 years meticulously trying to solve this problem, and they would end up learning a lot in the process. How did did Aristotle build on Plato's system? Aristotle's cosmology was abstract too, but he attempted to make sense of observations about the world. He crossed those same 4 elements, plus a new anti-void called the ether, with 4 physical sensations, hot and cold, dry and wet, and used these to explain everything. Earth was the heaviest element, so it was the center of the cosmos. Water was lighter than Earth, so oceans rested on top of the Earth. So far, so good. Air's natural state is above water. That also checks out. Fire is on top of air, which is a little weird, but it does go up, I guess. And way out past these 4 terrestrial spheres, out past the moon, spun the stars, acting according to their nature as ethereal or perfect circle-moving objects. And nowhere, anywhere in this theory was a void. Nature abhors a vacuum. In Aristotle's cosmos, all of the elements were actively trying to get back to their natural states. Why did flames rise? They were just trying to get back to the fiery celestial realm above the air. Thanks, Thought Bubble. From the pre-Socratics to Plato to Aristotle, we've ended up with a bunch of spheres inside spheres, each with a natural tendency. This confirmed the average Bronze Age farmer's experience, and ours. The Earth seems to stand still, water sits on Earth, air isn't very heavy. Aristotle recognized that elements didn't always exist in their pure forms. A tree, for example, was a combination of earth, water, and air. Roots go down into the earth and branches go up into the air. His theories also worked for comparisons. Why does a book fall faster than a piece of paper? Well, because it has more earth in it. Aristotle could even explain natural phenomenon. Why does rain fall from the sky to the ground? Why do volcanoes shoot fire up? Obviously, this isn't how I think gravity works, but it's a way of explaining it that made sense to the ancient Greeks. Where Plato saw a world of ideal shapes, Aristotle had a theory that acknowledged that we're all kind of a hot mess. Things are naturally jumbled up, but always trying to get back to their essential place. Aristotle also loved looking at living things, and he looked closely. He noticed, for example, that the octopus can change color, which is awesome, and that male octopi have a special arm called a hectocotylus, which is something you should Google, because it's weird and kind of awesome, and it wasn't confirmed by scientists until the 1800s. Aristotle trusted that knowledge proceeded from the experience of the senses. In his works, such as History of Animals, among others, he wrote down observations like these about all kinds of organisms. He also tried to classify the world into an orderly system, giving rise to taxonomy. When he attempted to answer one of our questions, what is life, the taxonomy he created relied on a system of souls. Plants were the simplest group, with only a vegetative soul, which let them grow and reproduce. Animals had a vegetative soul too, but they also had a sensitive or animal soul, which let them sense and move. We humans were set apart as the highest group with the 3 souls: vegetative, animal, and rational. The rational soul explained why we can think and reflect on ideas on top of all that other stuff. This led Aristotle to further theorize that all things can be placed on a line from simplest/least soulful to highest/most soulful. On one end, he placed plants, then worms, and so on. These low animals bore their offspring cold, dry, and in thick eggs. The higher animals made warm and wet babies. So of course, at the other end of the line, Aristotle placed men, meaning not humans, but dudes. According to him, cold maternal blood produced inferior humans, girls, while hot paternal semen produced boys. Aristotle was maybe not someone we would want to elect as our philosopher king today, but Aristotle's system of classification again seemed to confirm his classical and medieval readers' daily experiences. His proto-biological ideas stuck around in various forms until Darwin, getting lumped under the heading of the great chain of being, that all creatures on Earth stand somewhere on a ladder of perfection up toward God. You may have already guessed that this concept has been particularly troublesome when it comes to scientific racism, but that's a story for later. The creepier effects of some of his ideas aside, Aristotle had an answer for everything. For the most part, these ideas were based in observation and conformed to his common sense. His answers were able to explain how the world worked, most of the time. Not only did Aristotle come up with a complete theory of everything, he wrote it down. He was a prolific author, and a significant percentage of his texts have survived thanks to our Arabian scholars. Then again, Plato's transcendental ideas about the cosmos, even if wrong in their particulars, inspired centuries of scholars to think about the universe as having underlying laws, ones that hold regardless of what our senses can show us. So are you a Platonist or an Aristotelian? Or, taking a page from Socrates, is that a trick question?